I wonder how we find out this Hangout is live on air.
Okay, good.
All right, so I'm going to give you your computer back.
This is great. Okay.
I'm going to give you your mouse.
Okay.
And I'm going to sit over by you.
Okay. Come
So
hang
we
out
keep
wherever you'd like to be.
Yeah, that way I can get a good cuddle.
Okay. Now, where's the chat, though? How do we know who's online?
I have no idea.
Okay, let's check this out.
I'm going to grab my
Group
computer.
chat. Anybody
there.
visiting? You can't tell who's online?
I don't know. But we're going to go ahead and make this happen.
Okay, let's make it
We're going to
happen.
have a ton of fun. So, my name is Charles Sterling, and this is Audrie Gordon. As you guys can see us in living color. We have 12 viewers, woohoo! Which is down about 190 from what we normally have.
Yes.
But that's okay. This is our first foray into this.
Yes.
We started with a little bit of problems. We had to log me out. We logged in Audrie as me. So I'm not going to be able to do the Q&A. So the 12 people are going to have to self-organize and let us know what's happening. So hopefully you guys can help us with that. And Audrie is actually going to walk through forms today, if I remember correctly. Forms.
This is about forms today. We're going to dive into forms. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just to kind of introduce what we're going to talk about. Let me know if you don't see in the group chat.
I don't think they're going to see it yet until you hit the little green icon on the left-hand side over here. Perfect. Yes. And then if we Alt-Tab to PowerPoint, hopefully they can see that. And what
would you want to check in the, do we have a mobile app? No, nothing.
It will be my identity. I think it would still pull you out.
Okay.
So what I'll do is you go ahead and get started. I'll see if I can't create another YouTube persona, and I'll see if I can't get in with that.
Okay. Or you could pretend to be a person, just be signed out and go to the link that they use.
That's why Audrie makes a big bucks.
Yes.
I'll be an attendee.
Yes.
Okay, I'm moving over to my laptop. Go ahead, Audrie.
So in the meantime, whether you see or not, just to kind of go over, we're going to talk about forms today, but I always like to try to find out, how many people in the room actually know what PowerApps is. And since we're still working out the chat and we're still learning, how do we handle chat? I'm just going to go ahead and tell you what PowerApps is so that you'll know. PowerApps is a software as a service tool that enables you, whoever you might be, to build mobile applications and web-based applications for iOS, Android, or Windows Phone, as well as your top browsers. So with building one app, you end up with something that crosses all those platforms. Now, you start these apps by connecting to some data, and there's a variety of data you might want to connect to. You might want to connect to your SharePoint online site. You might want to connect to Trello. You might want to connect to Yammer or Slack or SQL. All of these things are possible through the ideas of connectors. And we also have a dedicated common data service that crosses all tenants. So you can actually build an app, publish it to the app source, and then it's available to all people in Office 365 or Dynamics 365, and even otherwise. So as we continue to grow the product, you'll see how flexible it is. Now, it is an organizational app where you build these apps and forms and workflows for your organization. So you publish them to your organization rather than to a store. And you can publish them instantly. You build them, you make them, you do them, they're done. You press a couple of buttons, and your whole organization or the security group or individuals that you selected can now use those apps on their devices. So it's a really cool tool. Now, we don't forget about the IT pro in this, because we also provide security mechanisms such as data policies to prevent accidental loss of IP. So there's a lot involved in PowerApps. It's part of the business application platform that enables you as a business to work faster, to innovate faster. So as opposed to waiting for budgeting and waiting for, planning and doing the whole typical waterfall process to get an app built for all these different devices, you basically can be enabled to build them yourselves and to publish them quickly. So I actually love PowerApps. There's a lot that it does. And it's fun to use too. It's made of 3 primary building blocks. So when you start building PowerApps, you're going to be thinking about those connections, of course. How do I connect to the different types of data? And the list of connections is growing. We have a list of released connections, which are about, I guess, a little over 50. And then we have a whole bunch of connections that are in test and that we call in preview. And you'll see those when you make the connection. I'll show you those today. Then you're dealing with galleries. And I had a webinar very recently about galleries where I went into detail into how to handle a gallery. And just to think of what is a gallery, just think of if you open your phone right now and you go to your contact list. The first thing you see when you open your contact list app is you see a list of names. That's the gallery. You scroll through the gallery to browse your data. And then when you click on one of those contacts, you hit what's called a display form, which is another control. The display form shows all the details related to the one contact that you clicked on. And then finally, if you want to edit that contact, then you have to click on an edit button and you'll be displayed an edit or create form. And that's what we're going to focus on today, the edit and create forms. All right. Now, I do want to go over some things that I think you'd like to know. For instance, what kind of forms can I make? I wouldn't think about this as a copy of what you've seen in the past. Microsoft is driving the digital transformation that enables you to build rich applications that are easy to use, fast to use, and beautiful. So you'll be able to create brand new types of form. I often say Power Apps revolutionizes the look and feel of forms. Here are 3 forms that you see on my screen right now. The one on the left is probably pretty typical to you. You have a field name, a label, and then you have a place where you put something. In the subject and description area, you type. In the priority and area, you drop down a drop down. You can do that, but you can also do what you see in the middle here, which is an application that instead of having a drop down for what kind of kudo do I want to give, right? Because this is a kudos app to say, yeah, you did a great job. As opposed to a drop down that says thank you or extending or teamwork, you're actually using images so that any size finger can get to those images and quickly tap on those images. And when they tap on the image, it sets that feel value. So it's a different experience, but the end result is the same. The list or the data source still ends up looking tabular, but the experience for the end user was improved. You even notice on the bottom, we have controls for talking into a microphone or playing back what you said. So really cool way of looking at app building. On the right is an app that I built. This was based on a customer that I worked for that was doing, they were maintaining crops. And so every day they had to measure the temperature and the humidity in the room where the crops were. These were they were grown inside greenhouses. And so as opposed to just having temperature, humidity, and boxes where they would type those numbers, I created this UI where there's 2 icons at the top. If you tap on the temperature icon, then you use that slider with your finger to slide the temperature icon. And if you tap the cloud, you slide that to set the humidity. And then you press submit. And guess what? The data goes straight to a SharePoint list, and it looks just like any other list in SharePoint. But the experience for the user was fast and easy and what I call finger friendly. So I really like forms like that because it makes it more fun to fill them out. And usually if people are enjoying their experience, they'll use the app more. So let's see, I'm going to go to the next slide and just show you one more, which is widescreen. So those 3 that I just showed you were like on a mobile app. Here's a widescreen view, and this particular app was built using the tablet format, and it's a tabular thing. So you click on general, you'll get the fields for that. You click on address, you'll get the fields for that. And so there's one single screen there, and it's just kind of jumping between each different type of data to fill in. If you're interested in doing a tab app, I've actually included the link to that blog on the screen so that you could go and check out the step-by-step instructions for how to do that tabbed form. All right, so I'm going to get to the demo real quick. I just want to give you a few more little basics on this, and that is we're going to be adding these forms using the insert menu. So there is an edit form, which is what we're going to work on today. The display form was the one I talked about earlier that you would see when you click on a contact, but before you edit it, right? And then the entity form is experimental. And I'm not going to go over that today. That'll be covered in a later webinar on CDS. Now, I do want to preview you or let you know, give you a sneak peek that we are constantly improving our forms, and we are right now working on, in this particular upcoming releases, some really amazing changes to forms. So you'll see things light up soon that I'm not going to be able to discuss today because I don't have that build live. So the anatomy of a form control. This is a really interesting thing. So I just want to show you here. You'll see that the form on the left is called a new template form. And you can name your forms anything you want, but they are by default named edit form. And then they count edit form 1, 2, 3 every time you add one. But you can rename anything in Power Apps. And sometimes it helps if you can find it later. But when I select a control, like underneath that created by, I've selected the owner. That's an owner field in the data source. So if I look over on the right, you'll see that I have different ways of showing that field. It doesn't even have to be editable. I can show it as view only. I don't have to allow people to edit, and that's available in the advanced properties, which we're going to do together. So don't worry, we'll see it live.
I'm not worried.
Good. And then on the right side, you can see the whole list of fields. And I do want to point out these icons mean something. So the X icon that you see on the right, the far right there under fields next to owner, means that it's been customized. So there's some level of customization that's associated with that owner field. However, the one with the little purple eye, that just means it's showing. So it hasn't been customized, but it is showing. And then on the bottom, and my screen might be a little bit small or it might be hidden, but if that eye is gray and it's grayed out, that means that that field is available, but it's not showing right now. All I'd have to do to show it is to click on it. So these are what I call the basis of how to get around on a form. And if you know this, you're probably going to be well on your way to success, right? And we're going to do this together as well. Another important thing about form is the most important properties of a form. And I would break those down to being 6 critical properties. There are a lot of properties, of course, for everything, every object in Power Apps, but these are the most important properties. First property, data source. What data is this form connected to? So as a whole, right? So in this particular screenshot, I had a list in SharePoint called video planning. And that video planning list was a connection. And so the data source for the form was set to that video planning list. The item is actually what item of that data should I show in this form? Because you can only show one record at a time in the form. So which record do you want to show? Because we build on these different screens, it's normally the item that you selected beforehand. So remember, if you were in an edit contact form, it would know that you selected from that first gallery that name. And so I can just set that to be browse gallery 1, whatever they selected, right? And then 2 that people often forget, I want to point these 2 out to you because they're really critical, is the on success and the on failure. So by default, when you create an app from a SharePoint list and you generate that, which we're going to do together, automatically the on success is set to back, which means that if the form succeeds in submitting, then it's going to go back to the previous page. So normally that would be the detail display form, okay, that says what are all the fields associated with that contact. Now, you can change that to something else. If it fails to go back, that's a good thing because we build in for you some error management. And we actually include on the form, which I'm going to point out today, error messages that will display in red if your form fails to submit. And I'll even point out what will cause it to fail to submit. And then you have an on failure, which you can actually say to do something. Like you could perhaps use a flow to log failures into a different list. You can get really creative. I mean, these are true business apps. When you submit the form, you'll just actually name it. You'll say submit form and then the name of the form. And that's when these tests will take place, whether it's success or failure. Next one is default. So sometimes when you open a new contact form, for instance, you might want it to automatically pick up the user's name, for instance, right? Maybe you're asking the user to fill out their contact details, but since technology is as smart as it is, we can pick up their name, we can pick up their location, we can pick up their department, we can get that on our own. So we can set default values for any field based on who the user is, even who the user's manager is, or who somebody else's stuff is. And we use the Office 365 connector to do that kind of thing, to look at the profile information. And we can default fields for them so they have less to type. Finally, on the bottom, a very commonly used property is the visible property. And the visible property is for the situations when you want to show something sometimes, and some other times you don't want to show it. So you can change the visible property. One that I use very often is the, notice the formula that I put there, edit form manager.mode equals new. And what that means is if this form is now in new mode, then this thing that I've selected will show. But if it's in edit mode, it won't show. So that comes in handy, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So let's go ahead and jump into Power Apps, and then we'll come back here and kind of talk about some of the other stuff like error management. Okay, so let's just switch to the browser. I've got something in my way. How do I get this to move? Okay, good. And I'm going to go to a SharePoint site. Let's go to, you know what, I think that's not a good one to go to. Let's go to, where'd it go? All right, so I'm actually going to go into a team instance. So this is a team site, and I've actually created a list for us to use today. And we're going to do something similar to that Kudo app that you saw, so that you can see some of the things we can do as far as that goes. So I've created this list, and in the list is like, the from is actually the title field, by the way. I renamed it from, but in the back end, it's still title. Then I have a Kudo type, which is where we're going to put expert, outstanding, or thanks. Then I have a department for the department, and a group, which is a subcategory of department. We're going to make a cascading drop down so that we can select the group. And then the given is who is this kudos going to? And then we have a follow-up, like if we want to follow up, what are the follow-up actions that may be assigned to this? And then finally, some comments, all right? So what I will point out to you is that this is a best practice. When you're building your Power App from SharePoint and you're going to generate your app, I suggest that you always start with at least one line of data. So this will help you when you're configuring your form. All right, now if your customer somehow doesn't want you to lose that first ID number, you can always save the list as a template after and restart, but you should have at least one item in your list. All right, so now I'm going to go straight up here to the ribbon where Power Apps comfortably sits, and I'm going to click Create an App. And now we're going to create an app together, and this is the Kudos demo app, and I'm going to click Create. Now, this is my favorite part of building an app in Power Apps. I can sit back and relax and allow Power Apps to do my job. I love it. What it does is it runs this little animation, which you'll see in a minute, and it builds a bunch of stuff. So it builds the browse page, the display page, and a form for me. So I have a starting point. I'm not starting from scratch, although you can. So obviously with that temperature form I showed you, I did start from scratch. You can. But I might as well let it do some of my work for me. Then it adds a whole bunch of formulas. It gives me search form functionality. It gives me all that submit functionality. I don't have to configure any buttons or anything. It automatically works and submits, and now all I have to do is customize it and make it better. So I really love that about Power Apps, and that's why I'm patient through maybe the 1 minute you might have to wait while it builds that app, because I'm always amazed at how much it did in that 1 minute. which would take me a whole lot longer than 1 minute to do if I was on my own, right? So if you look here, you're going to notice that on the right, we have a browse screen, which is this gallery that we start with. Then after that, we have a display screen, which is the screen you see after you select somebody, or a kudo in this case. And then finally, underneath that, you have your form screen. And all of this immediately works. So let me just show you that. I'm going to just run the app. And you'll notice, I have a little bit of a delay, so I have to wait a second. You'll notice that there it's displaying the one item that we have in there. What it's giving me is the finance department, the finance code, what kudo was given, and the little comment. So it kind of randomly picked that. I'm okay with that. And then I'm going to hit this, and you'll notice that that's the item detail page, right, with everything that I need. If I hit the edit icon, right, I can go ahead and change anything in here. And yes, it will automatically.
We're going to slow you down a little bit.
Sorry.
It's all right. You're just getting ahead of everybody else. You're just a fast learner.
I'm sorry. I'm a fast typer. So I click that little checkbox to kind of say, yes, that's what I want to do.
Yep.
And you'll notice right away my display form updated with the new data. And if I go back a screen, you'll see the gallery has also updated with the content that I said. So I don't want to spend any time on galleries and display forms, although look at the previous videos on galleries. What webinar that we had on gallery, we have a great one on that topic.
Galleries are my favorite.
Yeah, I love galleries too, because that's where you really can make your app beautiful. I'm going to go straight to the form page so we can get busy on forms. And I'm going to remind you of some of the things that I showed you in the PowerPoint presentation. So you remember I said that when you click on a control, right, over here you'll see in the advanced section actually what that control is on the right. And if I want, for instance, to change the way this looks, I can drop down the little ABC, right? And I can, for instance, make this a multi-line box so that it looks more like I can type as much as I want. And I will select that. And you'll notice you have view options for that field. You just go ahead and select the one that you'd like. And then the other thing that you'll notice is I am actually right now selecting a card. These are called data cards. And if you look on the bottom left, you have some breadcrumbs on the bottom left here, for instance, that actually say data card on the bottom there. And then if I click to the left of that, I will stop selecting the data card and I will select the edit form. I'm just kind of waiting for it to catch up. We got a little bit of a delay because now the edit form is selected. And notice on the right, the advanced properties are still visible for the entire form. And then if I click edit screen 1, now I'm unselected everything and I've only selected the screen. And that's going to happen in all of 2 seconds here. So you can bounce back through the items on your form just by using those breadcrumbs. But I'm going to actually reorder these fields just a little bit to show you how to do that. So to reorder fields, I basically select the whole form. And to kind of focus on the whole form on the whole page, I can click the little on the right side next to on the lower right, there's a 30%, which is the percent of zoom I'm in right now. I can also click that little square with the 2 arrows in it to zoom the screen so that I see the whole thing. And then sometimes that's a little easier for me to click on something. But remember, no matter what you click on, you can use the breadcrumbs on the bottom to select the edit form, because that's always going to be the parent of whatever you select in this view. So right now I have data card 15 selected, but on the lower left, if I click edit form with our tap edit form, then it will show me that it will highlight that edit form. And that's what we're going to see in about 2 seconds. There we go.
There you go.
So let's move things around. All right. So over there on the right, you see that you have a scroll bar. And I'm going to my scroll bar. Sorry to take so long so I can get up to the top of it. 1 second. There we go. I think I got my mouse back. Let me try my finger. So this scroll bar here on the right, I'm going to scroll all the way up to the top because you were seeing partially. So now I'm scrolling up to the top, and in a second, our screen will catch up, and there we are. You can see that comments is at the top. I'm going to move department up to the top. All I'm going to do is click on department and then drag up. You notice as I drag, you'll see a line marking where I'm going. I'm going to drag all the way up to the top and let go. I got to be careful not to drag this out. So I have a little bit of a problem because I have this delay. So let me try again. I'm going to drag up.
If you look at your screen, it'll probably
yeah. All right. So now it'll, in a second or two, department will be at the top. And now I'm going to do the same thing to drag up group. I'm going to just click on that and then drag it up. And now department and group are up at the top. So if I play this, you can see department and group are at the top. So it's very easy to kind of drag things around. But remember, I told you I was going to turn those into a cascading dropdown. So let's do that real quick.
Before you do that,
sure, you have some questions?
from Canada, actually, yes. I believe that's where she's from, was asking if you could actually go ahead and disambiguate the differences between screen, form, and card.
Sure. That's a very good question. So when I'm looking at this form, I'm going to look at it in full screen here. If I have nothing selected, on the lower left, it tells me that what is invisibly selected is the entire screen. And that screen is called Edit Screen 1. If you look on the far left, this is very much like PowerPoint slides. You have slide 1, slide 2, slide 3, and now we're looking at screen 3. So screen
the
1,
thumbnails
screen
on the
2.
left are showing our screens.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's just like PowerPoint because you can drag and drop them around, you can duplicate them. So, but when you have nothing selected, you by default have the screen selected, right? Now, if I click on something in this form, and it doesn't really matter, I'm just going to put my finger anywhere randomly on this form, it will select one of the data cards, right? So in this case, it's selected the data card for comments, all right? A data card represents, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain a data card. So within a data card is a container that holds all the information about a single field that will be updated. And this is really kind of important to understand because I can have a whole bunch of stuff on this data card, but what really matters is the update field. So I'm going to go up to the properties on the top left here, and I'm going to choose the update field, update property, sorry. And what will show to the right of that is data card value 15 text, which is the name of the control that you see there with great job with that wonderful video in it. That's data card value 15 text. And that's the update value of this card. So no matter what happens in that card, when it submits, it's looking for that update field. It doesn't really care about anything else, and that's what's going to update your data. So if I click on that control, I'm just going to click on it to prove to you that it's data card value 15. So you have data card 15, and on data card 15, there's a value that will be updated. And if you look up here, you can see the name in the tag up here, which sometimes I will change because the data card value number thing can get a little wonky. So sometimes I'll actually go change it to something more that I can recognize, like comments or something like that. You're welcome to change these names. On the bottom, the breadcrumbs kind of help you realize what you have selected. And you can see also on the bottom, the whole name is data card value 15. All right, now that's the value. When I click back 1, we did the card, which again, the card can have a lot of things on it. If we click back again, I'm on that breadcrumb, and I'm going to back up through that breadcrumb. So now I'm on data card 15. And then if I tap on edit form, now the form itself is highlighted. And then if I tap on edit screen 1, nothing on the screen is highlighted, but the screen is highlighted. So I hope that answered your question. Let me know if it did.
What's the difference between form and screen one more time for my own?
So the form is a control that holds all the data cards.
Got it. Got it.
And the screen is the thing that's there before the form arrives.
Okay.
Right? We just didn't see that process because
So the form is the container for all of our controls, including data cards.
including data cards, because data card is the parent of every control.
Okay.
Yeah, does that make sense? And I thought that was an excellent question, and I didn't think to explain that. So I'm glad you asked that question. So I was going to add the cascading dropdowns, unless you guys have other questions on the way this form works, because cascading dropdowns is a step up. So I would want to make sure that I have most of your questions answered.
I think so. Brendan's got one about creating goods, but it's not what you're talking about. So
okay,
I'll take that offline with them.
Okay. All right. So right now, I'm going to click on the department item here. And what I want to do with this finance field here is I'm going to change it to a new control for dropdowns. And I'm actually going to connect it to a list in SharePoint that I have dedicated to my cascading dropdowns. So I'm going to go back to SharePoint and just show you that list real quick. The list name is departments. And the departments list is really simple. The title column has a department name, and the group column has the different groups for that department. So if you notice here, you see sales, 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 and you see 3 values for sales, marketing, 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 and 3 values for marketing, and then finance only has 1. We're going to set up a cascading situation so that when they select sales, they only get S101, S201, and S301. They won't get anything else. So that's what we call a cascading dropdown. So I'm going to go back to Power Apps, and what I need to do to get the value of that departments list is add it. So I'm going to click on the Content tab in Power Apps. And so up in your tabs, just look for the Content tab. And now we're going to click on Data Sources. And then now we're going to add the departments list. So you notice that Power Apps already added the Kudo AG list data set for us. And that's because we built this from SharePoint. And so it automatically adds it for us. That was nice of it. But now we're going to add departments. And I'm just going to click on Add Data Source. And I will be presented with all the data sources I've ever used before. And if I scroll down, I can find my SharePoint connections. You notice I can have multiple SharePoint connections. You see that I have a couple of tenant connections here. I'm going to click on the one that's related to this site, and it's going to ask me, what's the URL of your site? Now, what I'm going to do is go back to the site and copy that URL from the browser. Now, I want the site URL and not the list URL.
And you know, it actually says list URL, and it doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Heads up. Thank you for catching that. Yes.
It was Yana who found this out for me in SQL Saturday. So thanks to Yana on the call. Anyways.
Yes. And it's a very good thing to point out. But honestly, we are going to work on getting that better, and so that you don't see the word list, because it wants the site look, not the list, right?
It wants the site.
And if you put the list, it actually gives you some kind of weird message that doesn't work, right? Once I do that, I can click Go. And then it'll present to me all the lists available on that site. So I can add multiple lists at once. So that's the advantage of that, as opposed to doing one list at a time, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click departments and then hit the connect button to connect departments to my app. And then what I'll end up is with 2 connectors. So now I'm ready to set up my cascading dropdowns. So in order to get started, I'm going to open up my data card so I have some room here. It'll help me see. And I'm going to insert a control, drop-down control. Now, what's very important, and you'll see that I just made a mistake, and I'm going to show you how to fix it. So I'm going to delete that control. This is what's really important. I must have the data card selected, and on the right side, the data card must be unlocked. So I'm going to click on the Advanced tab on the right side, and I'm going to unlock that field. That's really important. Otherwise, you're never going to get that control in that data card. You'll be trying all day. It'll end up outside of that data card, and it won't be in the data card. So make sure you unlock it, and then look on the bottom and make sure that you've selected data card and not, something else on the form. And then I'm going to go to the Insert tab, and we're going to go ahead and reinsert our dropdown. Now, once it's inserted, you'll notice this is good because on the bottom, dropdown 2 is a child of data card 9. This is really important because it won't recognize it as an update property unless we have it in that card. All right, so now that we've got it in there, I'm going to go ahead and put my items in there. So the items are the title field in the departments connection, but the problem with that is they repeat. So I'm going to wrap it around a distinct function. So the distinct function actually says, give me only the unique values for the column that you type after the comma, right? So if we look at this field up close, it's saying, again, give me the distinct values for the department's data source from the title field. And if you notice, if you click inside the parentheses, either in the front or the back, you have the syntax that shows up at the top, which helps you with functions and tells you, okay, what's the syntax for this function? Now, as soon as I did that, this automatically works. It's not connected to the SharePoint update property yet, but it works. So I'm going to prove that to you. I'm just going to come out of that function field, make sure I get rid of anything in the way, and I'm going to play this app. When I play the app, I'll drop down the sales field so that you can see that it's working. It's giving me the distinct values from that SharePoint list. So if somebody goes in there and adds a new department, my form doesn't not need to be edited. It's automatically going to work. So I kind of encourage this as opposed to hard coding things in your forms. You want them to be dynamic so that when the business is changing things in SharePoint, that's the beauty of working with SharePoint. They change it there and it automatically updates your list, your app. All right, now you're wondering why it says sale and sales and not finance, because we've only configured the control. We haven't connected it at all to this update property. And we've not said what the default value is. We haven't done anything but configured it. So if we look at the finance field, it gives us a little tip. It shows us that the default value for finance is parent default. So I probably can get away with copying that as the default value for my new control. Let's try. Notice that when I added that value, and it's coming, the default value of parent default, now it says finance, because I'm in an edit form mode right now because I had selected something when I got it started. So now the parent default of this list item is finance, and now our field shows the right value. Now, the last thing I need to do is I'm going to name this control so I don't forget what I'm doing here. I'm going to call this drop down departments, and so DD departments. And now that's going to be the field I would like to update SharePoint instead of this other one we had here before. So what I'm going to do after I name that field, DD departments, is on that data card, I'm now going to change the update value. And you can probably already guess what I need to do. I need to change the update value from being data card value 9, which was the old control, to being DD departments, which is the drop down that has our new configuration. Now, the difference is this is a drop down. It's not a text, it's text input box. So with drop downs, you say selected, which item they selected, and then the value, right? So I would like this form to update the field that's associated with this data card department by using the value that is selected in that control. So really straightforward. It's amazing how easy that was to do. I mean, I've done years of InfoPath, and I'm usually impressed. I mean, if I wasn't talking, that would have taken all of 2 to 3 seconds to configure. But because I'm kind of talking, it took a little longer. Now, I deleted the old control, and because I deleted it, I got a little error message here. And this is the other fun thing I love about Power Apps. Things relate to other things. So right here, there's this little hidden text box that contains any error messages that would come from this field submitting incorrectly. The position of that error message is set to occur after the control. So it said, make the position of this data card value 9, Y, whatever the Y position of that is, plus the height of that control. But since we removed the control, this doesn't make any sense anymore to PowerApp. So it's letting us know, hey, we don't have that field anymore. What we're going to do? And so all I'm going to do is change the data card value 9 to be DD departments for the Y property and for the height property. And what this does, if you watch very carefully, you might catch it. It's going to move that error message now below finance. Did you see that happen? Well, it's coming. Sorry. Here we go. Bam. Okay, because we took the position of that drop down and then we added the height of the drop down. And so that error message will always occur right after that drop down, even if I take this drop down and move it up. So this is a guru tip. When you're configuring your controls, remember that you can set up relationships between your controls so that things just automatically occur because they relate to other things, right? So I just want to show you that error message isn't visible unless you actually have it selected. But if you ever want to get it back and kind of see it, you go over to the advanced area on the right. You make sure the data card is selected. So you just tap on your whole data card, not the control. And then there's a drop down right under the advanced tab. And if you look for error message, you'll see it listed. You just tap on error message and that will re-highlight it. The WYSIWYG nature of PowerApps means that things that don't have any text won't show even to you as the designer until they actually have something. Right now there's no error, so there's nothing to show there. But if we did an error, we would be able to show it. And I will show you that hopefully if we don't run out of time, what happens. There's really two types of error trapping, the type that they build in for you, which is checking on submission if there's an error. Like if I was able, I'm not able right now, but if I was able to put a department such as human resources in that dropdown and then submit, and SharePoint wouldn't accept human resources, I'd get an error here. For instance, if I was using a choice list. Okay, so now I'm going to take that data card and I'm going to just make it a little bit smaller and do something very similar with groups. So now that you're an expert, you'll watch me make this bigger. I'm going to make sure I unlock my data card because I'll never get my drop down in there unless I do. Then I'm going to go and insert a drop down control. Now I look at the bottom and make sure that my drop down control is a child of data card 12. And then I can configure it. Now, this is interesting. It is also in departments, but how do we get the group that's associated to what we picked above? Well, we're going to do a filter, right? We're going to say filter departments where the title equals DD departments dot selected dot value. And now we're going to also return, we got to give back something. We're going to give back the group. Okay, so it's filter, and this is coming up. So you're going to filter your department list where the title equals what we selected in departments. And we want to give back, after you look that up, give me back the group.
That's probably one of the most common design patterns, using that filter, looking at other controls.
Oh, very, very popular. Filtering, searching, sorting, grouping, very popular. All right, so basically, we want to do the little two things we talked about before, because this control does work right now, but I want to make sure it is the control that's being read when we update this list, right? So I'm going to I'm going to rename this control first, and I'm just going to do that up in the top left there. You see the little tag icon. If I tap on that, I'm going to name this DD group, chronological. You can name it anything you want. I just like DD. That way, whenever I want my drop downs, I do DD, and then it'll go and find all my drop downs, and I can pick the one that I want. This is why I like to use like friendly names as opposed to just any old name. So now we have the default value. So in case this is an edit form, it'll pick up whatever's on SharePoint. So I'm going to do that next. So I'm just going to go up to the top here, and I'm going to tap on, I'm sorry, I unselected by accident. Reselect my control. I'm going to tap on the drop down, and I'm going to pick default because I want the default value of this to be, remember, I don't know, how many of you remember what we had to do to get the default value to match SharePoint? We had to type parent default, okay? And now it's going to match the parent. Now in this case, we kind of saw it right away. And notice when I'm typing, sometimes you'll see that orange error message. Most of the time, it just means I am not done typing. So don't worry when you see that error message pop up. Don't worry until after you're finished typing if it's still there, okay? So now that we've got that, the last thing we have to do is tell this card, when you update SharePoint, I want you to use drop-down group and not that other data card. So I'm going to highlight the card, and then I'm going to go down to the update property, and I'm going to change data card value 12 to DD group. And I'm sorry, it's not a text control, so I actually have to use the syntax for a drop-down, which is selected value. Okay, so now I can get rid of this control. Now, if you don't like that whole XY thing, and maybe you don't have time, or you don't think you need it, or whatever, you can just hide this. You can set the visible property on this because it's not being used anymore, actually, to false, and then just cover this up. Now, just remember though that if your dropdown has multi-lines in it, that could move your error message out of view. Right? Because remember, your error message is directly under that original control. Okay, so I just wanted to show you two methods just for fun. But now this should automatically work. I have confidence in myself. So I'm going to play the app. And once I play the app, I'm going to test out my drop downs. So if I drop down finance and choose marketing, let's do that. Now, it's going to go connect to SharePoint. It is doing a little connection first. And then after I've done that change, it will go ahead and change the group to only what's available to marketing. So not a problem. And then if I just want to go ahead and make that change, I'm just going to hit my checkbox to make that change. And you'll notice our display form is going to automatically reflect that change. It's all working. And how easy was that? We didn't need to know how to do any for if statements or loop statements, or we didn't have to catch, try. We just made a little simple formula and we got a drop down out the deal. Now, how much time do we have?
We have about 11 minutes.
Okay. I'm going to go back to the deck, and then I'm going to give you some tips from the deck, and then I'm going to call for questions, because I bet you have questions and I don't want to run out of time and you can't get your questions answered. So just talking about that little error message that we looked at briefly, we didn't look at it enough. But in real life, that error message responds to problems in submission, right? So the form is picking up what happens if the submission fails and succeeds in these properties, right? And it's going to change, that error message is going to pop up. It's going to reflect what your data source gives back. And that's what we call a post-submission error. But you can actually be a very talented business forms designer and implement pre-submission validation, which means I can set any text box to look at that field above it and say, if that text box, if there's a number in that text box that's less than 50, then display this error. So you can actually do what I call pre-submission error management, which should improve performance. As opposed to waiting until the user submits, go ahead and check as they enter their data. So one of the things I wanted to ask you guys is what we can do in the future is do another forms based on what you really want to know. So give us feedback on this webinar And if you want to dig into error validation, we can do that together. If you want to dig into using icons like in Kudos, we can do that as well. I do want to explain that I do have in the deck, I have instructions on what we did as far as the cascading dropdowns, and we'll make sure you get this deck. You also have instructions for adding the Kudo images. You remember the images that you saw on that form with the little outstanding and so forth? The instructions are in the deck so that you could try and do it on your own. If you need any help, reach out to me at any time, either from the community or just Audrie@Microsoft.com. And Audrie is spelled Audrie. I love to hear from you. Your ideas, it makes me happy. In the forum, in the community forum, you can add your ideas at any time, and I'm constantly reading those from the forum. Now, it's better to add the ideas to the forum than emailing me, and here's why. When you add them to the forum, other people vote on it. So I can actually see how popular your idea is. Whereas if you just send it to me by email, there's only me and you hanging out together. Let's get everybody involved in this, okay? So one more thing I want to point out is when you create forms from scratch, you have to use what's called a patch function, because you may not be able to use the form. Maybe the form doesn't have as much flexibility. Like that temperature and humidity form that I did, I could not have done that in a form control. So I just literally put those controls on the screen and configured them any way I want, which means I didn't have that little friendly submit button. So I had to create a button that would patch the data to SharePoint. So in the deck also that kind of explains that and how patch functioning works. Please be aware that you cannot patch choice list values and you cannot use multi-value fields. So now I'm going to open up these last few minutes to your questions, or if you want to see something in particular, we can pull over back to Power Apps and show you something you want to see.
It turns out Brendan's got a question about patch, and he had it 15 minutes ago. How perfect is that? So in this world that you're showing right now, what you're doing is you're going out and updating data into Kudos AG. He wants to know if I'm going out and trying to insert random functions, or he wants to use the rand function. So his data set is taking an ID that needs to be a unique number, and he's having problems with that. Have you actually tried doing that? And it looks like you might be doing multiple rows. So I'm wondering if you'd patch it first and then do a for all after the fact, or what would you recommend?
So for all could be helpful, Brandy. I'd like to follow up with you offline a little bit, because that is a topic that we can consider 3 different ways, and I don't know if I can pick the right one quickly off the top of my head. But if you're using SharePoint, you get an ID number by default. You could also leverage Flow to add something to that ID, so that you could have a column that uses that ID as your GUID, but then maybe it has some type of text as a prefix or a suffix. I've done that in the past.
It's a SQL table.
It's a SQL, so then you need to format. And I can help you with that. Let's do that offline though, Brandon, okay?
And it's an int too, so it's not like a timestamp.
It's an integer.
So he's got all kinds of bad things going on. Usually you don't use int for unique values. You use timestamps or GUIDs. But anyways,
and just an FYI on int, anytime you're trying to pass a number to your data source, Brendan, make sure you drop it in a value function. And I'll just kind of briefly show this to everyone, because it's kind of important that you all understand this. When you are working currently today, right? So things are going to change. We're gonna try and make this a lot easier and better. But when you're working in, unfortunately, I don't think I have a number in here. But if I were to add a control with the number 1 in it, right? So let's say I'm just going to insert a text box if I can here. I'm going to hit a text box just for fun, or it could be a text input. It doesn't really matter. And I put a number in there. So here's my text box. I'm going to put the number 1 in there just by typing 1 up here, right? If it was a text input, they could type the 1. But 2, when you submit that number 1 after you type it there, that is still text because it's in quotes. So you have to make sure that when you patch it, you do value, open quote, the name of the control, close quote, dot text, then close quote. The value function converts it to a number to make sure that it's understood as an integer wherever it might be going. right? So be aware of that. But Brandon, we can talk offline about SQL, little tips and tips. But for now, I just want you to understand that that is text, even though it looks like a number one, unless you wrap it in the value function. And
I think Archana and Dima are going to get into that a little bit.
Oh, good.
Too.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. So Archana is our SME on SQL. You'll get to see her wonderful. She's magical when it comes to SQL and connections and gateways. Any other questions?
So Yana was asking about whether or not she should go ahead and finalize her SharePoint list first, or actually go ahead and start doing storyboarding of the application and then update the list underneath of the covers as she sees that she needs to do changes.
That's a great question. You know, I'm so glad you asked that question. A lot of people do not pay attention to their information architecture, and it can definitely impact the feasibility of your app. So I do three things. I start by doing my list, right? And if it's not already there, sometimes you're kind of stuck with what's there. But I start my list. I make sure I have at least one item in there, which is my test item. I use it to design my gallery, my display form, and my update form. And then after that, I kind of ask myself, how can I improve upon this? And as I improve on my app, as I build my app and make it better, I might want to change things in the SharePoint list. I'm going to give you an example. I had a customer who wanted a page to be office use only. I want our office team to only see that screen, and I want them to be able to enter data that nobody else can enter. So what I had to do is create the fields in the SharePoint list that would be used on that for office use only screen. Then I had to also go into SharePoint and hide those fields. So enable the content types and make those fields not visible so that nobody could even from SharePoint would be able to get to those fields and edit them. Now I could go ahead and create my screen with the fields that we want this for office use people to see, and set the visible property to the appropriate audience. So you see that I had to make changes in SharePoint to make the app do what I wanted to do. You won't always have that luxury though, right? But if you do, it's great to start with a draft, and then quick storyboards. PowerApps is something you can draft in like minutes. Just kind of storyboard what you want your gallery to look like, your display form and your edit form, and then go ahead and get started with your app. And as you enhance it, enhance your SharePoint list as well.
I love iterative development. So, hey guys, we're about 2 minutes before the hour. I want to thank Audrie.
This was fun.
I want to thank you guys for actually.
Go back to the web.
And actually, you get to do that. Can you actually go back to our camera?
Stop sharing.
Stop sharing. And
so I can say goodbye.
We can say goodbye. There's us.
I just want to say goodbye. Thank you for coming. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing this. I have to get used to there's a little bit of a delay. So,
you know, the delay was on 24 as well, but we couldn't see it. So we had no idea that they were lagging. Anyways.
Okay. Well, it was great meeting you all. Please get to the PowerApps community. Give me some ideas. Let me know what you want to see, and I'll make it happen. And have a great week.
You guys have a great week.
Thank you, Sandy.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
And then I think you hit the one that says stop.